It's so funny that he said that because it ties right in so good. How's everybody doing? Okay, so we have a couple of things I'll just tell you about, announce now. Okay, so April 6th is the rally in LA, and it would be awesome if any of us, all of us, would like to go. There's another thing coming up. It's just been scheduled quite recently that we're going to have a service, like a unified District 5 Florida State. What's up, brother? Service, a unified service in Orlando. And it's going to be many different family-fed communities together. And it's coming up April, what is that Sunday? April 12th, 13th, 14th. It's right around there. So there might be a little bit of a retreat. I'm going to get more info after service. But keep that in mind. We may end up not having a service here. We are all invited to that service in Orlando. So I think it could be fun. And I think there will be a facility and food and things provided. So just keep that on your radar. I wanted to tell you now. I was texting last night and saying, do you have any more details that I could share? So when they come in, I will forward them out to you guys. So keep it on your radar a few weeks from now, right? So other news, we have the Freistatters that had their third grandchild, is it? And when was it? Yesterday? This morning. Let's give a round of applause. More babies, more babies. And we'll be praying for more, and help and support and love and health. So any other announcements I forgot? I'm sure there's so many. But yes, so we're going to be looking forward to I think there's going to be like a little, booming community happening. In our circle alone, there's so many, right? And we have to plan and think about the future. I think that's where my mind is at. So I called this Never Question Science, and I love it because he just talked about a super suit. And I wonder if something like that is actually possible, right? It actually could be, right? A jetpack disguised as a Men's Warehouse 3-piece suit. And it's kind of interesting because I was thinking about this. We go through life automatically. We've gotten so used to science just progresses. Hello. Science just progresses on its own, right? There's nothing that you do or that she does to slow science down or speed it up. We're just kind of gotten used to it. It just goes. And one day there's Alexa talking to me. And one day there's going to be a super suit. And the next day there's going to be flying jets. And we're just going to go along for the ride, right? Science is just always rapidly developing. But that's not the case necessarily for the moral or spiritual dimension. Moral development of our society, character of our society, spiritual truth of our society, awareness of our society, does not just happen on default. Oh, society must be advancing, right? Because we have better phones, right? And so there's a sort of kick back and let science and the world advance. That is not the case for our moral character. And so it's kind of an interesting, as science gets so advanced, we become a little bit convinced that science provides the truth. Science is the source of the truth, right? If you can test it, if you can prove it, then it's true. And there's an interesting sort of over-reliance on this. You could call it scientism, if you will. The belief that only the scientific stuff is the real stuff that you can really, really, really prove. So there's a couple byproducts of this kind of philosophy. It is a philosophy. You can't actually test that philosophy. So it kind of defeats itself. But there's other negative byproducts. And I think this is important because we're going to live in this crazy scientific world that's coming up, right? You have AI, you have all this stuff. What do we do? What do we do in response? There's some negative byproducts. One is if we over-rely on science to give us the truth and the answers and the solutions, we ignore the spiritual and moral realities and even causes behind things. And I think that's what's so great about us all meeting here, is that I come here to refocus and recommit to this idea that the cause of these things, of the atrocities or the tragedies in our world, cannot really be explained by a test lab or test tube. They cannot be explained. And when you dig deeper, I think one of the major things in our world that gets most of our attention now when it comes to things that are unfortunate and sorrowful are the mass shootings. And I was reading an interesting article that said, within the last decade or so, the 7 deadliest of those mass shootings, only one of the shooter was raised by their biological father. So I think it's interesting that out of all the analysis and all the reaction, I think in the future I would like to hear more voices, more outcry for stronger families. What if that has something to do with it? And so we can look deeper into these situations from a moral and spiritual point of view and probably find solutions to these problems. The second negative byproduct, and this is really big, and this is so subtle. Big and subtle, isn't that funny? The second negative byproduct is if you think that science is the only truth, that means everything else is up to your feelings. And this has actually happened a long time ago. This has been decades and decades of this kind of philosophy in our culture. Your feelings is your relationship to God. So I hear this a lot. You do you. Go ahead, you do you. It's okay. And at first it sounds compassionate. But I think we might be getting to a place where if I said, I think Barney the dinosaur is my God and I will pray to him, people will be like, cool, you do you. Yeah, whatever works for you. Right? And I never could figure out what bothered me about this type of thinking, and I had to explore it to sort of look at it. You'll see, this is kind of a common stance I see in TV personalities like Oprah. She says, whatever he or she or it or they that you pray to, you just got to do that. But it sounds compassionate. The problem is, if everything that's not science is just your feelings, you can say, oh, today I believe Barney is the God, tomorrow I don't believe in God. And when you take it even further, you can say, well, today I don't want to be a man, I want to be a woman. Because everything else is science proves what it can, and everything else is my feelings. You decide. And I realized, wow, that's how you can get to the sort of self-identify culture we have now. I think when it first started coming out, it really, I don't know about you guys, but to me it was just totally discombobulating. What caused this? I self-identify as a lizard. Okay, yeah, you do you. You do you. Because everything that's not science is just up to your feelings. If your religion is every day of the year you self-identify as a different animal, you go ahead and do it. Because that's what makes you feel good. The problem is we're ignoring the natural law, the observable reality that God did design us with intention in families. We're ignoring that. And so if you're mad, can you imagine a world where you could just make up the rules like that? I self-identify that I disown my parents. They're no longer my family. How would that feel, right? So this attempt to be compassionate, oh, you do you, can get very quickly messy. And I think that might be why we're heading into this weird area now where there's more and more science and more studies and more popularity in changing yourself, changing your face, surgery, and now DNA, genetics. Have you been hearing about the genetic babies? Like you can DNA edit and change it. So I can self-identify as whatever I want. I can edit my babies and do whatever I want them to be like. And at the end of that road, what does that really sound like we're doing? We're playing God. We're playing God. We're replacing God. You're saying, God, out with your system. I'm making up the system now. I'm in charge. Your order is out. You have to know that there is an order and a design in this world. And I learned this lesson. My mom was a really good teacher. I learned this lesson when I was like 10 years old or younger. And I was looking through a pile of clean, dry laundry, right? There was it fell out of the laundry machine. You guys know how it goes. It just falls out. It's all over. And I look in there and I'm digging in. And there's a folded towel at the bottom of this pile. And as a kid, I freaked out. I was like, whoa. I've never seen this. It tumbled around for an hour in the dryer, and it came out and just landed and it folded. I was like, that's incredible. And I was kind of a puzzle, I don't know, I liked sports and games, so what I tried to do for the next whole afternoon, this is the true story, is I took a towel and I started to throw it in strategic ways to see if I could recreate the fold. Like, hey, what if I throw it and it would fold, you know? And I could not do it. I could not do it. No matter how many times I dropped the towel and I twisted it a certain way, I could not get the towel to land folded. I challenge you all at home. If anybody could do it, man, you better videotape it. I tried. And my mom taught me an awesome lesson that day. She said, well, that's actually the argument that a lot of people use for God. Anything that has order, like folding, proves that it took some kind of intelligence to make it that way. Interesting, right? And so the thought occurred to me this morning, even if our entire universe was just one folded towel, that's all that existed, it would prove or imply intelligence. Maybe God was just really likes orderliness, right? And he just folded this towel and he was happy. Even one folded towel. So then you think about our world and the planets and how they circle in time and in order, and the climate and how it balances itself out. And you think about all the systems outward from that one folded towel. And you realize you cannot deny that there is some kind of mega intelligence going on. Mega intelligence. So what happens when you try to decide, well, I'm going to ignore the fact that I'm designed and I'm going to just self-identify the way I want it to be? Very quickly it becomes chaos. I mean, if your hammer that you were trying to use to build a house decided to self-identify as a saw, it wouldn't work so well, right? If the nail you were trying to use, like, no, I self-identify as a leveler, nothing would get done. Absolutely nothing. And Paul tells us we are the body of Christ, right? We are the body, and that each part of the body has a different, do you know the word? Function. We function a certain way on purpose, by design. We don't just exist, we function. And so you have to think about the world we're trying to build. We are building a world, right? It's one of our key phrases, building the kingdom of heaven. We build it. Yet we don't have a clear understanding of hard truth. We just leave it up to self-identify, right? That will lead to chaos. I think, so let me get to the bottom of this. Let's be real. I think at the bottom of this type of thinking where you do you, I think it's an attempt, a genuine attempt perhaps, to be compassionate, to not be judgmental. And I know that in raised the way I was, and some of you were, and many people in many different religions, we might have felt that we were raised with a very heavy hand of truth, heavy dosage of truth. It's this, and it's truth, and that's the end of the story. Get with the program, right? Definitely hits home for me. And the Bible talks about this balance, and a lot of preachers and theologians talk about there's this careful balance in life that is so hard to find. It's an ongoing, I think we're all going to work on this for the rest of our lives. And that is the balance between truth and grace. So how can God be a truthful God, and how can there be so much spiritual absolutism, but God is just forgiving of everybody's sins? How does that make sense? And so I think when you have a generation raised, or maybe you have a certain phase of humanity raised a certain way where it's all about truth, heavy-handed truth, I wonder if we're swinging like a pendulum back in the other direction where it's all about grace. It's all about, I'll just totally respect whatever you do no matter what. You follow me? It's interesting, right? But the real bottom line, I think the goal for us is to find the careful balance. Because I was thinking about it. If somebody paid me for a guitar lesson, right? Let's say Portion pays me $40 for a guitar lesson. And he says, okay, tell me, Joe, what do I need to work on? And I say, well, why don't you pick up the guitar and play something? And he plays something that just goes, you know? And I go, that was great. I mean, you do you. You're an artist. Brilliant. He'd be like, I want my money back. No, tell me the truth, right? Tell me the truth. How do I get better? Doesn't that make sense? It's not very loving as a guitar teacher, right? To say, no, you're good. You're good. Just come back next week for another lesson. And there's so many examples I could think of where that's the case. And they say only a real friend will tell you when your teeth are dirty, right? You know that feeling when you get home and you see something right there and you're like, no one said anything. So I invite you, if I have something in my teeth during one of these talks, I tell you, you have to tell me. We're on camera here. I can't ask Daniel to Photoshop the whole video. Although he probably could do it. Sometimes the truth is loving. I think God gave Moses the moral law because it was out of love, not out of, this God is controlling, this God wants to run my life. And if you think about the context, there's so much context to that Old Testament time period that people don't talk about so much, which is, the whole don't worship other idols. It kind of feels like, I don't know, to me it doesn't hit home so hard. It doesn't seem relevant. But back then it was very relevant. These other idols demanded very serious atrocities as their payments or worship. Terrible, heinous things. So out of love, we got the law way back then. And so out of love, I will tell you, practice your E chord and your A chord and do it like this and like that. God is training us. We have a lot of growing to do, right? We need training. We need a lot of training. And we need the truth to help us get there. When you take the truth out of the picture, the growth basically stops. It kind of just stops. And that's my sort of commentary. The compassionate thing sometimes is, hey, I know you want to be a musician, but you gotta sing in tune. You know? You gotta sing in tune. And so we totally respect that information. Thank you for telling me. Well, some singers defend themselves, right? No, you know, how dare you question my artistry? And I've been like that before. But you follow me, right? There's a truth to being in tune. And there's a truth to playing in time. And I was thinking about this, musicians are so funny. I love to rag on them from this place because they're so intense about the truth of groove and rhythm and pitch and timing and taste, right? I mean, they'll look at you like, bro, slow down. You know, like they'll yell at you on the gig or on the show or give you a dirty look. If you're playing, you know, Mary had a little lamb, you know, it's a little out of tune. It's like, bro, fix that, practice that. So we're so intense when it comes to, or we're so judgmental, right, with American Idol. Oh, pitchy, like we're Simon Cowell. We need it to be in time. We need it to be awesome. We need it to be in pitch. And musicians are so intense about that, but then they're not intense about anything else. Nothing else. My God is the Care Bears. Okay, you do you. So we need to kind of recalibrate the pieces and the spine, the core truths that we want to hold on to through all the chaos. And I think we can all kind of agree that the world is very tumultuous at this point, right? Looseness and no definition will not help stabilize a chaotic world. And I think that's what's so awesome about what we study in Divine Principle and the Bible is that there's something steady. There's something eternal here that we can grab onto that can steady us. So I want to encourage you all, there's two sides to this kind of message. Because once you start grabbing onto that truth and you have no grace in you, it's disaster, and you're burning all the relationships. And we had a whole message about that a couple weeks ago, how even Paul in the New Testament says, do not nitpick over your brothers in Christ because you're going to make them feel so much pain that they won't even want to be on the path towards God. Don't do that. Paul said it in the New Testament. Don't do that. Only stick to the essential things, which is loving God. So there's two edges to this. We need to have ultimate grace and compassion. And we also need to seek that ultimate truth from God, as taught us by the Messiah. So this is the balance, and I want to just kind of share this sort of area of study that I've been thinking about, because for a little while, I just could not make sense of this culture and this world where people are identifying as whatever they want. And if you think about it, it really comes down to we're playing God, and we have no faith in spiritual truths. We only have faith in science truth. So I wanted to equip you with that. If you ever want to research it yourself, there's lots of interesting articles, theologians that are talking about it right now. It's called scientism. Scientism. So the belief that that's the only source of your truth. So I encourage you all, those of you who are clinging to the truth, I know some of you, you're hardcore, you know what you believe, work on the grace part. Right? We know you got the truth part. Work on the grace part. And those of you who are very gracious and you love people and you want to accept people and be compassionate to people, we want to work on defining what is those core things that we know to be true and we're not going to budge. Those core things that are going to hold us through our lives. To me, those core things are so succinctly and beautifully described in our teaching. That the family is the school of love. That love and joy is the purpose of creation. To me, you can boil those things down. So that's a little bit of my homework for some of us, is define the core metrics that you won't change. This is what I really believe. That's going to steady you through a very wild and rocky world, okay? So thank you very much, guys.